So today in this video I would like to present to you 5 points on how you can detect pseudoscience, and I would like to use a beautiful crystal here that I have. Actually I also got a second one here, beautiful crystals here as an example to demonstrate this. First of all, what is pseudoscience? Pseudoscience are statements or claims that sound scientific but actually they're not, right? And because they violate a whole range of different characteristics of good science. So pseudo actually means false, and there are plenty of pseudoscientific claims out there. And here I want to simply demonstrate one pseudoscientific claim, and that is that these crystals are able to protect you from so-called electromagnetic fields. What does this mean? A mobile phone, of course, it's a telecommunication device. It radiates radio waves at a certain frequency, and it basically generates electromagnetic fields. They do exist, they can be measured, and now some people are afraid of those, and so what they do is they buy those crystals here, and by placing it on top, they believe that this kind of absorbs this electromagnetic field. Right? I mean, honestly, it already shows it cannot be. If they were to absorb it, you wouldn't be able to use the phone during that time, right? That's a different issue, but because then, of course, it's not able to communicate the phone, so it's already evidence that it doesn't work. But in any case, people who believe these pseudoscientific claims, they sometimes will spend quite a bit of money on those crystals and other devices that essentially are claim to solve a certain problem which actually doesn't exist. Yeah, so essentially the problem of electromagnetic fields doing all sorts of nasty things to you. I mean, unless they're very strong, it's not a problem. And those mobile phones, essentially, they do generate electromagnetic fields. Of course, we know that they can be measured, but to use those crystals here to protect against them is complete nonsense, right? So what are some of these, what are now the 5 parameters here? And the first important characteristic that you're dealing with pseudoscience is that pseudoscience is very resistant of being disproven. What does this mean? If you actually make a measurement now, like electromagnetic fields without the crystal and with crystal, you're not going to detect the difference. Yeah, and if you show that evidence that there is no difference to a believer of pseudoscience, they're going to reject this evidence. They're going to say, oh, you made a mistake, right? Says, okay, then let's repeat it again, right? And you again show them that essentially there is no difference. They're going to find another excuse why essentially it's not valid. So whatever you show them, whatever evidence you show them, they're not going to accept the evidence because they want to continue believing what they believe. And as a matter of fact, this is not even a new thing. One of my favorite authors, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, he is the inventor of Sherlock Holmes, the fictional detective. And Sherlock Holmes, basically one said it's a cardinal mistake to theorize before one has evidence, because invariably one will twist the facts to suit the theory instead of changing the theory, right? If you have evidence that it doesn't work, then you have to accept these crystals don't work, and that's it. Yeah, and it's not like questioning the evidence. Yeah, so that is essentially one of the hallmark features of pseudoscience is that whatever evidence you provide, people are going to reject it. So what is the second point? Second point is what's called appeal to authority. If you read those web pages that are selling these things, you're going to find big names. I mean, just Erwin Schrödinger, the important physicist who was involved in quantum mechanics, Einstein, all important names. And all of these names are there to provide credibility to the claims. But actually, there is absolutely no connection. Because just because you read Schrödinger and Einstein and all these important physicists, I mean, honestly, what does this have to do with those crystals protecting you from electromagnetic fields? Nothing. They're just throwing in those names to provide credibility and to impress, and that's also a second hallmark of a pseudoscience. And of course, people who don't have a strong science background, they might not notice that. Right? They're throwing around with scientific words and fancy terminology. And as a matter of fact, that's already the third point, is the use of fancy jargon. Like, for example, sometimes even invented terms, right? And sometimes they talk about negative energy or quantum mechanics or whatever. Yeah, electromagnetic fields, of course, they exist, but I mean, in a context where it's completely non-scientific. So in many cases, you just read the text and you feel very impressed, at least people who don't have a strong science background. And they, oh my gosh, it's so fancy. But actually, to me, this is just BSing what they're doing. Yeah? So you have to be careful of text that you're reading or messages or speeches on pseudoscience. It sounds very impressive, and then you kind of feel a little bit intimidated and you feel, okay, I don't understand everything. So you automatically assume that what they're saying must be correct, but actually it's just a connection of meaningless terminologies and which has absolutely no point. Yeah. So that was the third one. The fourth one was also very important. Is the shifting of the burden of proof. We call that. It's like this in the sciences. If you make a certain claim, like for example, this crystal protects against electromagnetic waves. If you make a claim, then it is up to you to provide the evidence. It is not up to the critic to provide the counter evidence. I want to give you an example. If I basically say that, okay, it protects against electromagnetic fields, yeah, okay, what evidence do you have for that, right? It's not like this. You cannot say then, well, actually, you provide the evidence that it does not work. No, that's not the way it works in the sciences. And if I do provide the evidence that it does not work, we're back to point one. They're not going to accept it. Yeah, so that is the shifting of the burden of proof. Who has to provide the evidence is usually shifted away from the person making the pseudoscientific claim. Yeah, they cannot provide the evidence for this, right? And that's why they're kind of reversing it and saying you provide the evidence that it does not work. Yeah? And that is essentially a very fundamental, I would say a very common and a very fundamental concept in scientific thinking is that if you make a claim, you have to provide the evidence, and here, yeah, it's exactly the other way around. So last but not least, is point number 5. If there are so-called testimonials are replacing solid scientific evidence. So if you say the following, basically it works because the people that are talked to, they sleep better because of the crystal on the mobile phone, because it kind of protects them from electromagnetic waves, and this is why they sleep better, right? And you cherry pick so-called anecdotal evidence, then this is not science. You have to do large-scale statistics. But they're going to reject all of that, and they're going to immediately point their finger and say, yeah, but for this person it helped. Yeah, of course you cannot deny that, because maybe the person indeed did sleep better with the crystal here on the mobile phone. It's quite well possible, but it might not be because of the crystal, but because for either a placebo effect or pure coincidence even, or because of psychological reasons that essentially he felt more comfortable without having to worry about those electromagnetic fields, and therefore that's why he slept better, right? But it's not necessarily because of the crystal. But very often it says the counter argument is, yeah, but it doesn't matter why, as long as it helped. But it didn't help. Because for the majority of people, it didn't help. But this evidence is ignored, because what they're doing is they're cherry picking the evidence to the handful of people who claim that it helped them. Right? And the majority is ignored. So, and that is also one of the problems, that you're not getting the full data set, but essentially only the testimonials of the individual people that have been cherry picked. Yeah. So yeah, that's basically the 5 points very quickly about how you could detect pseudoscience, but actually, of course, there are more points as well, but I think that these are indeed the 5 important ones. And I'm just saying, yeah, be careful. Yeah. And for me, that's all that I would like to share with you. And see you in the next video. Bye-bye.